The Galactic Concord station hung in the void like a jeweled wheel, 200 species packed into its grand amphitheater, and every single one of them was there to talk about the same embarrassing problem: humans. The official agenda called it the Terran question. The unofficial betting pools called it the fastest war in recorded history. Place your wagers now. The Vrenn'kai Empire, undefeated across 4,000 years and 1,100 campaigns, had formally declared war on Earth that morning, and the only real debate left was how long the humans would last. The Kelith bookmakers gave them 2 hours. The Asari analysts, famous for generosity, gave them 4. One lone statistician from the Meridian Combine, considered a hopeless romantic by his peers, went out on a limb and predicted humanity might survive 5 full hours. He was laughed at over lunch. The problem was that nobody could quite figure out what humans were. The Concord's Xenocultural Division had spent 3 years studying intercepted Earth transmissions and had emerged from the project visibly shaken. The lead researcher's report included phrases like, "They deep fry an entire bird once a year for a holiday about gratitude," and "They strap themselves to explosive tubes recreationally and call it a hobby," and most disturbingly, "They appear to have domesticated an apex land predator specifically for cuddling purposes." The report was dismissed as translation error. Surely no species drank literal poison for fun and then operated heavy machinery. Surely no species climbed mountains that were actively trying to kill them and described the experience as refreshing. Into this chamber of galactic titans walked Earth's entire diplomatic presence. One man. Commander Danny Reyes. "Danny, please, Commander makes me sound like my father," arrived carrying no weapons, no entourage, and no visible concern. What he did carry was a tin of homemade cookies, which he set on the negotiation table like it was a church potluck. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, with the kind of weathered, friendly face that suggested he'd help you move furniture without being asked twice. He wore a plain gray suit, a cheap wristwatch, and a smile that never seemed to fully leave, like it had signed a long-term lease on his face. "Morning, everybody," Danny said to a room containing beings who had watched stars die. "Or afternoon. Or whatever cycle y'all are running on. Time zones are tricky enough back home. Can't imagine coordinating a whole galaxy. Anybody want a cookie? Snickerdoodles. My grandmother's recipe. She'd have loved this place. Real high ceilings." The chamber stared at him the way one stares at a small animal that has wandered onto a battlefield. At the head of the war delegation loomed High Marshal Threxel of the Vrenn'kai, 3 meters of armored chitin the color of dried blood, his carapace scarred by 1,000 boarding actions. He regarded Danny with the specific contempt reserved for things beneath contempt. "This," Threxel announced to the chamber, "is what Earth sends. A single soft creature bearing baked goods. Your species has existed for a cosmic eye blink, human. We were burning worlds before your kind discovered fire." "Yes sir, we're real new here," Danny agreed pleasantly, entirely unbothered, as if he'd been complimented on his lawn. "But you know, back home we've got a saying, it's not the years, it's the mileage." He selected a cookie for himself, took a bite, and gestured at the High Marshal with the remainder. "And I'll tell you what, that's a real nice shell you've got there. My grandma had a Buick that exact color. Ran for 30 years. Couldn't kill it if you tried. People tried." A confused ripple moved through the amphitheater. Was that respect? An insult? A threat? The translation matrices offered no help. The Vrenn'kai delegation conferred in low clicks, apparently trying to determine whether they had just been compared to a vehicle, and if so, whether it was a good vehicle. Not everyone in the chamber was amused. 3 tiers up, wrapped in the silver robes of the Ashen Archive, sat Elder Vashtu, eldest delegate of the eldest species in the Concord, a being who had outlived empires the way Danny had outlived haircuts. Vashtu was the only one present who had actually read human history rather than skimming the summary, and what he had found there kept him awake through rest cycles. He had tried twice to address the council on the subject. He had been politely ignored both times. Now he watched the smiling man with the cookie tin the way a meteorologist watches a horizon that is far, far too calm, and said nothing at all. Closer to the floor, assigned to the thankless job of monitoring the Terran envoy, hovered Ambassador Click of the Chitauri Combine, a junior insectoid diplomat whose entire career consisted of assignments nobody else wanted. Click had prepared for this posting by reading the standard threat assessment on humans, which was 2 pages long and mostly said harmless, loud, obsessed with something called sports. He approached Danny with his notation device ready and his expectations low. "Envoy Reyes, I am required to accompany you during your station visit." "Well shoot, that's the best news I've had all day," Danny said, and appeared to genuinely mean it. which threw Click off worse than hostility would have. Always better to see a new place with a local. You eat lunch? What am I saying? Everybody eats lunch. Lunch is universal. It's the one thing I'd bet on. And that was the pattern of the day. While the War Council droned through formal declarations and the Vrenn'kai read their 60-page statement of grievances, humanity's crimes apparently included unauthorized existence in a strategic sector and an insufficiently respectful first-contact greeting, which had been, in fairness, a NASA probe playing Chuck Berry. Danny wandered the station with Click, charming everyone in his path and asking questions. Endless, harmless, oddly specific questions. He asked a Vrenn'kai logistics officer how a fleet that size kept everybody fed, because Thanksgiving for 12 nearly ends my family every year, and you've got 10,000 ships. He asked a communications engineer how the Armada's relay network handled signal lag across a star system. Just 'cause my nephew loves spaceships, he'd never forgive me if I didn't ask. He asked about formation spacing, about refueling schedules, about which navigation charts the fleet trusted. And every single question arrived wrapped in such warm, folksy harmlessness that the answers tumbled out before anyone thought to wonder why he wanted them. And always, between questions, Danny checked his cheap wristwatch. Not anxiously. The way a man checks the oven. Click noticed. Click noted it down. Click could not have said why it bothered him. By evening cycle, the council reconvened for the formal close of session, and Threxel rose to deliver the verdict the galaxy had gathered to hear. The Armada launches within the hour, the High Marshal declared, savoring it. 10,000 warships. They will reach your pitiful system in 3 days. This is not a war, human. Wars require 2 combatants. This is an extermination, and history will not remember it long enough to give it a name. Have you anything to say? 200 species leaned in to watch the small soft creature finally understand its situation. Danny drained the last of his coffee, set the cup down gently, and checked his watch one more time. When he looked up, the smile was still there, but for just a moment, something behind it wasn't. 3 days, he said. Shoot. Better call home and tell him to put the porch light on. He stood, gathered his cookie tin, and nodded around the chamber like a man leaving a pleasant barbecue. We love company. He left. The doors sighed shut behind him. The amphitheater erupted into laughter, wagers, and the comfortable noise of a galaxy certain of tomorrow, all except one silver-robed figure on the 3rd tier, who had gone very still. That was not bravado, Elder Vashta said quietly to no one who was listening. That was not even a welcome. His ancient eyes stayed fixed on the closed doors. That was a dinner invitation. And not one of you thought to ask who is being served. Below him, the betting boards updated in cheerful, glowing script. Humanity survival. 5 hours, maximum odds. Somewhere down a quiet corridor, a man in a gray suit checked his watch, smiled at nothing, and began softly to whistle. The Armada launched on schedule, 10,000 warships peeling away from the Vrenn'kai staging grounds in formations so precise they looked machine-stamped, and the entire galaxy tuned in to watch. Galactic media outlets ran continuous coverage. Commentators with impressive credentials and more impressive headgear analyzed fleet vectors and predicted kill ratios. The Keleth network sold advertising slots for the moment of Earth's surrender at prices usually reserved for coronations. It was, everyone agreed, the entertainment event of the century, a foregone conclusion with excellent production values. Which is why the surveillance feeds from Earth itself caused such profound confusion. The humans were not evacuating. The humans were not panicking. The humans were not, as far as any analyst could determine, doing anything a doomed species was supposed to do. Long-range observation showed cities lit up not with emergency sirens but with what appeared to be celebrations. Enormous outdoor gatherings. Open flames with meat on them. A phenomenon the Xenocultural Division eventually identified, with visible reluctance, as alien invasion watch parties. In a region called Texas, a human entrepreneur was doing brisk business selling commemorative shirts that read Vrenn'kai Armada World Tour 2026, cancelled, which was baffling on several levels, not least because the tour had objectively not been cancelled and was in fact 3 days from arriving. Ambassador Click filed his reports with mounting distress. They are not afraid, he wrote to the Chitauri Combine. I have interviewed the Terran envoy support staff via relay. I asked one of them how humanity intended to face annihilation. He told me they had, quote, seen this movie before, and that the aliens always lose to a farmer with a shotgun and a dog. I asked what a shotgun was. He laughed for a full minute and told me I'd find out. I do not wish to find out. Please advise. It was Elder Vashtu who requested emergency time before the council, and Elder Vashtu, who was granted it mostly out of politeness to his age. The ancient scholar stood in the amphitheater with 3 centuries of research compressed into a single presentation, and he did not waste it on diplomacy. "You are reading their calm as ignorance," he said. "I ask you to consider the alternative. This is a species that domesticated an apex predator, not for labor, not for war, but for companionship. They looked at a wolf and thought, 'I will make that my friend and it will sleep at the foot of my bed.' This is a species that consumes a literal neurotoxin recreationally, in social settings as a bonding ritual. They call it happy hour. This is a species whose members climb frozen mountains with no atmosphere at the summit, at significant personal expense, for no strategic gain whatsoever, and describe the ones who die doing it as living their best lives. You are not watching a species too stupid to fear you." He paused, and the silence in the chamber was the uncomfortable silence of an audience waiting for a joke. "You are watching a species that has already priced in the danger and found it acceptable. There is a difference, and the difference is going to matter in 3 days." The chamber gave him the response ancient scholars always get: respectful nods, followed by total dismissal. Threxel's deputy stood and thanked the elder for his colorful anthropological poetry. The betting pools did not move. Vashta returned to his seat on the 3rd tier and resumed watching the doors Danny Reyes had walked through, like a man watching a fuse he alone could see burning. The subject of all this analysis meanwhile was having a lovely time. Danny had requested, politely of course, a tour of the station while the council deliberated, on the grounds that, if these are my last 3 days, I'd hate to spend them in a conference room, no offense to conference rooms. Click accompanied him, notation device in hand, and slowly went insane in the specific way reserved for beings who notice things nobody else notices. Because Danny was sightseeing the way no tourist sightsees. He lingered in the logistics hub, marveling at the cargo manifests. Now that his organization My Mother Would Weep, while his eyes tracked supply routes. He charmed his way onto the engineering deck by asking a Vrenn'kai technician about her family until she was showing him holos of her brood and, somewhere in between, the exact architecture of the Armada's communication relays. He stood at observation windows and admired the fleet's departing formations with the enthusiasm of a man at an air show, asking about spacing and rotation schedules, and every answer went somewhere behind that friendly face and never came back out. The corridor incident happened on the 2nd day. 3 Vrenn'kai soldiers, young, oversized and drunk on their Empire's certainty, cornered Danny near the maintenance decks, looming the way 3-meter armored beings loom. Click froze. Danny did not. "Well, hey there, fellas," Danny said, delighted as if he'd run into neighbors at the hardware store. "You must be with the Marshal's Honor Guard. That's a good posting. You want some gum? It's cinnamon. Kicks a little." The soldiers had prepared for terror or defiance or begging. They had not prepared for gum. The largest one, thrown badly off script, informed Danny that his species would be ash within the week. Danny nodded along sympathetically, the way you'd nod at a man complaining about traffic, and asked if they'd be flying with the main fleet or the reserve elements, because, shoot, I'd hate for you boys to miss the action. Deployment schedules are brutal. My cousin missed his own wedding over one. 11 minutes later, the soldiers left the corridor feeling vaguely victorious and having disclosed, without one of them noticing, their squadron's exact position, rotation timing, and refueling window. Danny watched them go, unwrapping another stick of gum. "You boys stay safe out there," he called after them warmly. "Space is real dangerous for folks who travel in predictable formations." Click's notation device hung forgotten at his side. "You are not a diplomat," he said. It came out barely above a whisper. "Are you?" Danny turned, and the smile he gave Click was, this was the strange part, the part Click would puzzle over for years, completely genuine. "Oh, I absolutely am, buddy. Best job I ever had." He clapped a hand gently on the ambassador's thorax. "Diplomacy's just war with better catering." On the 3rd day, the Armada crossed into Sol's outer system, and the galaxy's coverage reached fever pitch. Odds boards updated in real time. The romantic Meridian statistician's 5-hour prediction now looked embarrassingly generous. Serious analysts were measuring humanity's remaining existence in minutes. High Marshal Threxel, broadcasting from his flagship bridge on all channels, delivered a pre-battle address that historians would later study for entirely unintended reasons. "In 1 hour," he thundered, "the galaxy will be cleansed of the smiling vermin. Let their silence be eternal, and let it begin now." And Earth obligingly went silent. It happened all at once, between one sensor sweep and the next. The watch parties, the barbecues, the joke transmissions, the radio chatter of 8 billion loud, unbothered people, gone. Every signal from the human homeworld simply stopped, the whole planet going dark and quiet like a house when the porch light snaps off and something inside settles into wait. The commentators called it terror. The analysts called it a communications collapse. On the third tier of a distant amphitheater, an ancient scholar closed his eyes and called it what it was. Positions. On the observation deck of the Concorde station, Click found Danny at the great viewport, watching the live feed of the Armada's approach. The cookie tin was gone. The folksy slouch was gone. Danny stood perfectly still, and for the first time since his arrival, he was not smiling. He looked at his cheap wristwatch, one last time, unhurried, the way a man checks an oven when he already smells that dinner's ready. "Click, buddy," Danny said quietly without turning around. "You might want to look away here in a minute. Where I'm from, we call this next part the FAFO portion of the evening." Click's translator chewed on the acronym and produced nothing. What does FAFO mean? Out in the dark beyond Jupiter, 10,000 warships crossed an invisible line that only one species in the galaxy knew existed. Danny slid his hands into his pockets, watched the feed, and answered in the gentle, patient voice of a man who has waited 30 years to say something and intends to enjoy it. "You're about to find out." The first thing the galaxy learned, in the moments before everything changed, was that the war had never been Threxel's idea. He believed it was. His empire believed it was. Every analyst charting the Armada's course believed the Vrenn'kai had chosen this fight. They were all wrong, and they were wrong by 30 years. Earth had wanted this war. Earth had invited it, patiently, deliberately, the way a spider does not chase but builds. The single envoy with his cookie tin, the watch parties, the joke shirts, the whole galaxy-facing portrait of a soft, silly, harmless species. Bait. 3 decades of being underestimated, engineered on purpose, aimed at exactly one outcome. Somebody, someday, was going to swing at the smiling little species. Humanity had spent 30 years making absolutely sure that when they did, it would only happen once. The Armada crossed Jupiter's orbit in flawless formation, following their star charts toward Earth. And here was the second thing the galaxy learned, though it would take investigators months to fully believe it. The charts were lies. The Armada's communication relays, the same relays a friendly human had asked about for my nephew, had been compromised by human intelligence long before the war was ever declared, and for the entire 3-day crossing, every Vrenn'kai navigation system had been drinking from a poisoned well. The fleet believed it was sweeping wide of Sol's debris fields on an optimal attack vector. In reality, Earth had been gently, invisibly steering 10,000 warships, degree by falsified degree, into the one region of the system humans had spent a generation preparing. The asteroid belt. Except it wasn't an asteroid belt anymore. It hadn't been for decades. Under the cover of mining operations, dull, unglamorous, thoroughly documented mining operations that no intelligence service in the galaxy had bothered to look at twice, humanity had converted the belt into the largest fortified kill box in recorded history. And the Armada's own sensors, fed by their own corrupted relays, cheerfully reported the corridor ahead as empty. On the Concorde station, 200 species watched the live feed in a carnival atmosphere, drinks in hands and tentacles, waiting for the extermination to start. On Threxel's flagship bridge, the High Marshal savored his moment. And on a dark world behind a switched-off porch light, somebody looked at a clock and said quietly, "Now." Minute 1. The asteroids opened fire. All of them. At once. The feed showed it before the commentators could speak. 10,000 points of rock across 100,000 kilometers igniting in the same half-second. A coordinated volley from emplacements that had waited years in silence for exactly this firing solution. There was no warning shot. Humans, it turned out, did not believe in warning shots. They believed in the first shot, and they believed in making it count. The Armada's forward screen, 300 warships of an empire that had not lost a battle in 4,000 years, ceased to exist as a fighting formation before its crews finished registering the light. On the flagship bridge, a sensor officer said the words that would be quoted in military academies for the next 1,000 years. "Sir, the asteroids are shooting at us." And Threxel, staring at his displays, produced the reply that would be quoted right underneath it. "Asteroids don't do that." Minute 2. The Armada did what any veteran fleet does under ambush. It executed an emergency withdrawal along its charted safe corridors. Which were also lies. The falsified charts, having led them in, now led them into each other. Squadrons wheeling onto clear escape vectors found other squadrons wheeling onto the same coordinates from the opposite direction, because Earth had drawn every exit on the map to converge. Vrenn'kai discipline, 4 millennia of it, became the weapon that killed them. Every captain obeyed the charts, and the charts were hostile. Cruisers collided with cruisers. Formations designed to be beautiful became formations designed to be trapped, folding in on themselves like a closing hand while the belt kept firing with the relentless, unhurried rhythm of something that had rehearsed this. On the station, the carnival noise had died entirely. A Keleth commentator, mid-sentence about kill ratios, simply stopped talking and never resumed. Somewhere in the amphitheater, a drink hit the floor and nobody looked down. Minute 3. The trap grew its teeth behind them. Across the outer system, the derelicts moved. For decades, the approaches to Sol had been littered with dead hulks and drifting junk, failed human colony ships, abandoned freighters, debris that every survey had catalogued as harmless wreckage and every navigator had learned to ignore. The wrecks powered up. All of them. Weapons hot, engines live, crews aboard who had been rotating through those cold hulls and secret shifts for years, and they slid into position across the Armada's rear like a door closing on a vault. The last exits vanished. 10,000 warships, what remained of them, were now sealed inside a killing ground the size of a solar system, with fortress guns ahead, phantom fleets behind, and their own instruments still insisting, politely, that none of this was happening. And then, because humanity apparently could not resist, every channel in the combat zone lit up with a cheerful automated broadcast, in flawless Vrenn'kai, in the bright tones of a theme park announcement, "Thank you for visiting the Sol system. Please keep all hands and tentacles inside the wreckage at all times. We hope you enjoy your stay. It's already lasted longer than we planned for." Minute 4. Threxel surrendered. It needs to be said plainly because the galaxy would spend years trying to soften it. The most feared military commander alive, heir to 4,000 years of unbroken victory, looked at his tactical display, at the third of his armada already dark, at the corridors of lies, at the dead ships that weren't dead sealing his fleet inside a bottle, and understood, with the sudden totality of a man falling through ice, that the battle had been lost before it began. Lost 3 days ago when his fleet first trusted its charts. Lost 3 decades ago when the galaxy first laughed at the soft little species. His voice, broadcast on all channels, did not thunder. "This is High Marshal Threxel of the Vrenn'kai Imperium. All ships stand down. All ships stand down. We surrender." A pause and then, smaller, almost to himself, the question every species watching was asking, where did they even come from? Minute 5. Silence. The belt guns went quiet the instant the surrender registered. Instantly, cleanly, a species with perfect fire discipline releasing a trigger it had held for 30 years. Human vessels moved through the wreckage not to destroy but to collect. Disabling drives, taking crews aboard, extinguishing fires on enemy ships with the same brisk efficiency they'd used starting them. The undefeated armada of the Vrenn'kai Imperium, 10,000 warships for millennia of terror, was gone as a fighting force, disabled, captured, or destroyed in less time than it takes a human to microwave a burrito. The feed timestamp told the galaxy the number it would never forget. 5 minutes. The optimists had given humanity 5 hours. The event itself had taken 5 minutes, and humanity had spent one of those minutes on a theme park announcement. In the amphitheater of the Concord station, nobody moved. 200 species stood in a silence so complete that the hum of the station's air system became audible, every eye and stalk and sensory cluster fixed on the feed of drifting Vrenn'kai hulls. The betting pools quietly began issuing refunds. There was no protocol for odds that wrong. And in that silence, from the third tier, Elder Vashta rose, the only being in the chamber who was calm, because he was the only one who had done the reading. "You gave them 5 hours, he said, and his old voice carried to every corner. They needed 5 minutes. And here is the part you must understand or you will never sleep soundly again. They only needed 5 minutes because they spent 30 years making sure of it. That is what humans are. They do not fight wars." He looked around the chamber at the mightiest civilizations in the galaxy, standing very still. "They finished them. Before you, no one has started." At the observation window, Danny Reyes turned around. The warm smile was back in place like it had never left, like the last 5 minutes were a pleasant show he'd caught between errands, and he addressed the frozen council in the easy tones of a man wrapping up a productive meeting. "So, now that everybody's had a chance to think about it, anyone else want to declare war?" He let the question sit. Nobody breathed. "No? Wonderful. Then let's talk trade agreements." He lifted the tin. "I brought more cookies." Somewhere in the back rows, a delegate fainted and nobody laughed. The holding cells aboard the Concord station were designed to be humane, which meant they were comfortable in the way waiting rooms are comfortable, clean, quiet, and impossible to mistake for anywhere you want it to be. High Marshal Threxel sat in the center of his 3 meters of scarred chitin folded into a stillness that had nothing to do with peace, and stared at the wall the way defeated commanders have stared at walls since the invention of losing. He had been there 2 days. He had refused food, refused counsel, refused the visits of his own surviving officers. When the door finally opened, he did not look up because he already knew who it would be. The smell of coffee arrived first. "Evening, Marshal," Danny Reyes said, pulling up the room's single chair and settling into it like a man visiting a sick neighbor. He set 2 cups on the table between them. "Didn't know if your folks drink coffee, but I figured after the week you've had, worst case, you can just hold something warm." Threxel's voice came out as gravel. "Have you come to gloat, human?" "No, sir." And the strange thing, the thing Threxel would turn over in his mind for the rest of his long life, was that it was true. Danny slid 1 cup across the table and wrapped his hands around the other, and when he spoke again, the folksy warmth was still there, but something underneath it had gone quiet and level, like deep water under a sunny surface. "I came to answer your question. The one you asked on all channels, minute 4. Where did they even come from? You deserve an answer. You're the only one who earned it." Threxel finally raised his head. "We didn't come from anywhere, Marshal. We were always there. That's the part your analysts couldn't swallow." Danny took a sip of his coffee. "Your people looked at us and saw a species that jokes too much, feels too much, scares too easy. And you were right. We do and we are. You just read it backwards. You thought fear makes a species weak." He set the cup down. "Marshal, we're not dangerous because we don't feel fear. We're dangerous because we industrialized it. 300,000 years of ice ages, famines, plagues, predators, and each other. Every generation of us grew up staring extinction in the face, and we learned to smile while we planned. The barbecues, the watch parties, the jokes about farmers and shotguns, that wasn't a species ignoring the danger. That was a species that had already finished preparing and had an afternoon free. 30 years, Threxel said slowly, tasting the number like poison. The minefield, the charts, the derelicts. You built it all before we ever declared. Before you ever thought of declaring." "Yes, sir." Danny nodded, unhurried. "First thing we did when we cracked interstellar flight was look around the neighborhood. And we saw a galaxy that settles things the old way, and we did the math every human government has done since the first village put up a wall. Somebody was going to test us eventually. Couldn't know who. Couldn't know when. So we prepared for everyone, and then we did the hardest thing my species has ever done." The smile flickered, briefly, into something almost rueful. "We acted harmless. 30 years of playing the fool on the galactic stage. You have no idea what that cost us. We are not a patient people by nature, Marshal. We are a people who learned patience the way you learn anything that matters, because the alternative was dying." Then the war. Threxel stopped. The pieces were assembling behind his eyes, and Danny watched it happen with something like respect, letting him get there himself. The war was never the objective. The war was the demonstration. There it is. Danny leaned back. "We didn't beat you to conquer the galaxy, sir. Stars know we don't want it. Have you seen the paperwork? We beat you so nobody would ever make us do this twice. One fight. Public, overwhelming, and fast enough that every species watching understood there had never been a moment we weren't in control of it. 5 minutes of violence to buy 10,000 years of nobody ever trying again." He shrugged. "Cheapest peace treaty ever written. Cost us 5 minutes and 0 human lives. Yours too, mostly. You'll have noticed we shot to disable after the first volley. Dead enemies can't go home and tell the story. We needed the story told." The silence stretched. When Threxel finally spoke, the arrogance was gone, burned out of him, and what remained was the raw, simple question of a soldier who has met something outside his universe. "What are you?" Danny stood, collected his cup, and paused at the door. The politeness came back over him like a coat, warm and complete. "We're the neighbors, sir. And good fences make good neighbors." He nodded, once courteous as a Sunday. "You just found out what our fence looks like. Drink your coffee before it gets cold. It's worse cold. That's universal too." Click was waiting for him in the corridor, because of course he was, notation device nowhere in sight, and the little ambassador's question came out before Danny had fully cleared the door. Was any of it real? Click's antennae were flat with something that translated across every species in the galaxy as hurt. The lunches. The questions about my combine, my work, was I an asset, Envoy Reyes? A relay to be compromised? I have reviewed our every interaction and I cannot find the seam between the friendship and the operation, and it is keeping me from sleep. Danny stopped. And for the second time that day, the deep water quiet came up under the warmth, but this time it came up gentle. "Buddy, you can't find the seam because there isn't one. That's the answer. That's the whole answer. And it's the thing your threat assessments will never get right about us no matter how many times we demonstrate it. He crouched slightly, bringing himself level with Click's eyes. You're all still looking for the mask. Kind human on the outside, predator underneath, and somewhere there's a line where one stops and the other starts. There's no line. There's no mask. The kindness and the predator are the same animal. Back home we've got these creatures called dogs. Sweetest souls alive. They'll love a stranger in 11 seconds flat. They'll grieve you when you're gone. Descended from wolves. Every inch of them. He straightened up. We didn't remove the wolf, Click. We just gave it a family worth protecting. The lunches were real. The friendship is real. And if anyone ever raises a hand to your combine, they'll find out exactly how real, because that's what our friendship is. Both things. Same animal. Click stood very still for a long moment. Then with great dignity he said, I would like to get lunch. Now you're talking. I hear the commissary got ranch dressing in. Brace yourself. That stuff should be a controlled substance. It was Elder Vashtu who made it official 3 days later before the reconvened council. The ancient scholar rising from the third tier one last time, not to warn anymore but to conclude. The Ashen Archive formally petitions for alliance with Earth, he announced, and rode out the shockwave of murmurs with 4 centuries of practice. Not from fear. Hear me, not from fear. From recognition. The old civilizations of this galaxy survived by avoiding conflict. We hid, we appeased, we endured. Humanity survived by mastering it, by staring at the worst thing in the universe until it blinked. Both are wisdom. But only one of them ends wars in 5 minutes and then serves cookies, and I have decided at my age that I would rather stand behind that fence than wonder about it. He inclined his head toward the human delegation's single chair. Also, the snickerdoodles are genuinely excellent. I have had 6 months. That was all it took for the galaxy to reorganize itself around the quiet fact at its center, and the strangest part, the part the historians would circle for generations, was what humanity did with its victory. Almost nothing. No annexations. No tribute. No occupation. Earth conquered exactly 0 worlds and instead unleashed something far more insidious. Trade routes, medical exchanges, engineering partnerships, and a chain of human diners that spread through the Concord systems like a benevolent infection. Aliens who had watched the 5 minutes in horror now stood in line for cheeseburgers. The Meridian Combine officially classified ranch dressing as a controlled substance after an incident nobody would fully explain. The Keleth networks, having refunded the betting pools, made the money back tenfold, broadcasting a human cooking program. The Vrenn'kai Imperium itself, demilitarized under the treaty's astonishingly gentle terms, was rebuilt as Earth's shipping and logistics partner. 4,000 years of fleet discipline, it turned out, made them magnificent at freight. And in a warehouse complex on the Vrenn'kai homeworld, a demoted former High Marshal personally ran the most efficient distribution hub in 6 sectors, and was, to his own private bewilderment, weirdly good at it, and something quieter than happy but sturdier than peace. A saying took root across the galaxy in those months, passed to every new species at first contact, printed in the orientation materials, taught to hatchlings and podlings and broodlings alike. When the human smiles and offers you cookies, say thank you, take the cookies, and never, ever test the fence. Which brings the story to its last afternoon, 1 year on, in the same grand amphitheater where it began. A new species had made contact. The Skarn Dominion, all spines and certainty, fresh from their corner of the spiral arm and blissfully unaware of recent history. Their war herald stood in the center of the chamber, delivering the ancient speech of the strong to the soft, demanding tribute from the Concord, promising fire, and building toward his declaration against the small pink species in the cheap gray suit, and the chamber went dead silent. Not afraid silent. Embarrassed silent. 200 veteran species slowly, in unison, turned to look at the human delegation's chair, with the collective wince of an audience watching a stranger pet the sweet old dog a little too roughly. Danny Reyes didn't even look up from his coffee. He turned a page of his crossword, smiled at nothing in particular, and slid a plate across the table toward the herald with one finger. Cookie? Fresh batch. He filled in a word, unhurried. And before you finish that sentence, friend, you might want to ask around about how long our last war took. Go on. Anybody here'll tell you. I'll wait. He glanced up then, just once, warm as a porch light. I'm real patient. For about 5 minutes. The herald asked around. The Skarn Dominion signed a trade agreement by evening and left with the tin. And Click, Ambassador Click of the Chitauri Combine, friend of Earth, 400 lunches deep into the strangest friendship in the galaxy, recorded the ending in his final report, the one still taught in First Contact Academies today, The galaxy predicted humanity's defeat in 5 hours. Humanity ended the battle in 5 minutes. But here is the number that matters, the one we should have been betting on all along. In all the years since, across all the stars we share, nobody has fired a single shot. The wolf sleeps at the foot of the galaxy's bed. And we have never slept safer.